careful roaming around in areas you're unfamiliar with. You might run into a Skinwalker or a Wendigo. These are 5 first-hand accounts of creepy experiences with the unknown. Enjoy.
This is my first experience with any sort of cryptid or odd creature. Apologies if I've been told wrong information or something I've said seems stupid or vague. Before making this post, I was clueless and had a conversation with my cryptid-obsessed friend, and he told me all about what I saw could have been. Everything he told me seems very convincing, and honestly scared me a ton. Anyway, I was visiting a reservoir, nature reserve area with my older brother. We'd gotten there late, and it was rather dark by the time we'd sat to take pretty pictures of the night sky and what we could see. My brother set up his phone to take a picture. I don't know the details of it, but this photo took 30 minutes to take. We sat on a bench and talked while we waited. As we sat there, I heard 2 loud yelps and a scream not too far in the distance. I brushed it off as some animal freaking out far away. But then, I heard footsteps a while afterwards. They were on concrete, but the footsteps didn't sound like they were made by the impact of a shoe on hard ground. Again, I brushed it off as an animal. My friend told me this could have been the Skinwalker I saw later on, and so I thought it followed me. Moving on to when I actually saw it. Further into the day out, we were walking through the darkness on the way back to the car so we could get home again. As we walked, I had my head turned to my brother as I was telling him about something funny. Midway through my sentence, he stopped, shushed me, and said, "What the hell is that?" I slowly turned my head to the left, and I saw a slim humanoid standing there, still. Its bottom half was covered by the tall grass, and it hunched slightly. My brother shone his phone light at the thing, trying to look closer, but it was too far away, and it made practically no difference. I couldn't make out any details, and my phone was dead, so I couldn't snap a photo either. We stood and looked at it for a very short while before getting a little too scared, so we turned our backs to the thing and continued walking. I continued to look behind my back very, very frequently, in case it stalked us, but it disappeared. I could have sworn it was there the past 2 times I'd looked back. When I was back home, I'd figured it either fled or kept following us after being told by some info by my friend. My friend told me with fair confidence that I saw and heard a Skinwalker, although he admitted he isn't all that of an expert. I came here to see what you all thought. Sorry if there's any holes in my story. This is my first experience seeing anything out of the ordinary. These are the encounters in chronological order. I'm a 16-year-old girl. My brother is a 26-year-old man. Haley is an 18-year-old girl. The first one. My brother and I were sitting outside on our porch at approximately 10 p.m. Our house is surrounded by forest. The nearest gas station is 8 miles out. We smelled an incredibly potent and pungent smell of death. When we went to investigate, the smell was not there. It was about 10 feet closer to the forest across the road. That continued until we were at the forest, and the smell was only at the edge of the road, and not back at the house where we first smelled it. Of course, it could just be the wind, but with our dog the next morning, we scouted out the property and found no carcasses. The second one. I was taking a walk this time, about 1 a.m., when, again, I smelt death. I investigated, and in the ditch, the road was close to a substation, was a bag. 2 black plastic bags taped together with what looked like carpet and electrical tape. On the lower end looked like the form of 2 legs. I flipped my ever-loving shit. I called my mother, and I called my brother, the same one mentioned before. My brother came out with some gloves and walked the 5-minute walk down to the substation. Me, with 911 on dial, watched him open the bag to find various animal parts sewn into human anatomy, with a goat head and at least a horse leg as one of the legs, and, honestly, I could not identify any of the other animals. I called the substation, left a message, and went home, because I realized it was not a police matter. The third story. Me and my best friend Haley are deep into the woods, a mile away from anything. We both can defend ourselves and have no fear in doing so. We are sitting on a dock that is near falling apart on a small pond. From about 30 feet behind us, we hear an ambulance. I feel it important to emphasize the protective nature that I have. Amber alerts, police sirens, people yelling. They make me stop in my tracks to investigate. They always have. I have some weird monkey urge to know what's happening. So when I heard the ambulance, I jump up to follow the sound, or see the lights. And when I do, the siren breaks into screaming. Guttural woman screams. I'm aware of how similar bobcats, foxes, hogs, owls, and various prey sound in pain to the human screaming. I know the difference, and that was not this. It did not sound like pain, nor fear, just grief. We promptly left and had no other encounters that night. Story 4. This was last night. It was midnight, and we were driving home through the forest. On a turn, Haley and I saw what I can only describe as a jackal and a German Shepherd hybrid. It had the distinct jackal shawl, was much too large to be a coyote, but maybe a large dog. It was leering at us, and it was not afraid. Do you guys think this is a skinwalker or something else? I'm stumped and properly terrified. I will first start off by saying I'm not entirely sure if what I saw was a skinwalker or not, but it was definitely terrifying. Also, apologies for formatting since I'm on a mobile device. My boyfriend and I arrived in the small town of Burns, Oregon, just a few days ago. It was too late to continue hitchhiking, so we decided to camp in for a sail field next to a closed-down grocery store. We always watch a few episodes of our favorite shows until we either get tired or our phone dies. This night, our phones died first. So, we sat up talking until about 1 a.m. and finally decided to try and get some sleep. Now, this was next to impossible because while this town is very much so in the high desert, there are lots of farms that use irrigation. The mosquitoes were awful, and we had 0 bug spray. Before getting to sleep, I noticed about 100 or so yards away, give or take, somebody walking along the fence line across the field from us. I think nothing of it and just assume it was a local tweaker or something. Nothing we haven't had to deal with before. Plus, we have a dog that would alert us if they decided to come closer while sleeping. The only weird part is the fact that they weren't walking towards any houses. They were walking towards a huge open field that was behind us. Also, They would walk a ways, stop, look in our direction, and then repeat. We finally get to sleep around 2 to 3 in the morning, and almost as soon as we do, we hear this thump, thump, thump. I jump up and scream, "What the hell?" as this huge black silhouette figure slowly runs past us. It was less than 10 feet away from us. It was like the shape of a wolf, but seemed much larger. It was dark, but this figure seemed to disappear into thin air. Mind you, the fields we were in did not have tall grass. Not even 2 minutes later, a deer appeared out of thin air and slowly walked by us. It kept staring at us and just gave me such an eerie feeling. My boyfriend tried to console me and say it was probably just a deer that what we saw, but turns out that was just to help me sleep. The next day, he explained to me in detail what he saw, and it was exactly as I described above. This might not seem like much, but it was definitely a terrifying experience. Okay, here's a disclaimer. These are all my mom's stories from when she was young to her early 50s. When my mom was young, she lived on the border between the towns of Calistoga and Napa, nestled on the base of a large hill. Her house, connected to the main highway by a long, winding driveway, was built directly on an old Native American campsite. We know this from local history, and the many obsidian arrowheads we found scattered in the creek bed along the driveway in the dirt in the backyard. The backyard had a pool, and then a small lawn, which trailed off into the wild, dense hillside. My mom, who was a bit of a tomboy, loved to explore up in the hills with her 2 older brothers. She recalls one time while they were walking up in the hills, she was around 10 or so, maybe 11, when they started hearing their mother's voice. But something was off. First of all, it was coming from deep in the woods, and secondly, it was oddly slow, and the words sounded forced, and most unnerving of all, it was calling for them each by name to come to the bear cave. This is what they call the small cave up in the hills, one far from where they were. She and her brothers immediately turned back. Thankfully, they weren't that far from her house, so they were able to get back safely. She tells me this happened, voices calling to her that sounded like her mom, dad, and brothers, as well as hearing sounds that she described as a growl, like if a bear and a cow had a baby and it got mad. Now, skip forward around 40 years. My mom has turned the place into an inn after my grandmother died. The first signs that something weird was happening was when she found a dead buck in the backyard. Now, living in the hills, there were a lot of deer, and a couple of dead does and bucks weren't necessarily out of the ordinary. But the buck looked like it had been ripped apart. Flesh was scattered everywhere in the pool, on the pool deck, and in the grass. But what my mom thought was odd was the fact that only the heart and stomach were missing. Nothing else, just a torn into stomach and a missing heart. The last story I've heard happened a couple months ago. She was outside with our Labrador, cleaning up around the pool. It was twilight and the sun was nearly set. She suddenly starts hearing the same bear cow cry up in the hills. It gets louder and louder, and so is the lab's barking. Our lab, usually a sweetheart, is going ballistic. She's barking and growling as loud as she can, nearly drowning out the cries. My mom immediately takes her inside and locks the doors. The cries stopped after an hour, but she was thoroughly shaken. So far, these are the only stories she'll tell me about. She still doesn't let my brother and I up into those hills, though she claims the noises and deer were only mountain lions, and the voices were just her young imagination. I believe it was a Wendigo. Be 16, be black and have family down in Alabama. They farm and own huge amounts of land in Huntsville. Uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting or camping. Down south, cousins suggest that we go out there to camp. No, I'm a city kid from Chicago, so they tease the hell out of me. Collect food, kill a pig and some chickens, and bring necessities to camp out for a few days. We get to the camp and it's obvious something is weird. Air has this weird electrical smell, like right before a storm, like ozone or something. We think nothing of it and unpack and go down to a little creek to swim for just a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in the crook of his arm and says hello and asks us what we're doing this far back into the woods. I tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and says we're out camping. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together. There was a big animal in the woods. His son, who is my age, asks if he can stay and hang out. He says okay. So we end up playing football and dicking around. There are me, the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. 5 girls and 6 boys, and we're all around 15 to 17. We ended up just dicking around the day, and going back to the camp and pulling out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had kitchenettes. Tanner said he wants to run home. His family's property sits up against my uncle's, and asks if he can come out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him, since it's getting pretty dark, and one of the girls says she's going to walk with them. It's about 7 o'clock, and it's starting to get pretty dark. They take flashlights and take the trail toward Tran's property. The rest of us chill and make s'mores, drink and kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of the ozone again, and you could smell it over the smell of the fire. It became this really nasty coppery smell, like right after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that nasty metallic back of your throat smell. We immediately think that's some kind of electronical malfunction, or someone left a hot plate on or some shit. We search the trailers and nothing is there on, and all we can do is just smell it. All of a sudden, we can hear people poking down the path towards us and Roaster. Tan and the girl all come running into the clearing out of breath, and they don't even break stride. They all run into the trailer right by where the fire is. We all nope the hell out of there and get into the trailer. They end up calming down. Even Rooster is crying his eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower. So my other cousins just say screw it and are about to go outside to get the generator out of the shed between the trailers. Tanner goes, hell no. Lock the front door, ain't nobody else going outside. He's been crying too, and his eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are dirty as shit. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said sure he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take on the hunting rifle just in case. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before, and then on one of their pigs had come up ripped up and half eaten. They assumed it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they don't usually mess with live animals. He had gone upstairs and packed his stuff, and told his dad they would be okay without the rifle, because coyotes usually avoid people. So they started walking back toward where we were camping. So, Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but she was just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods toward the camp when they started to hear crap in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they were unsure at first what the hell it was. The The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and they all beamed their flashlights over there, and there was someone standing back in the woods a little hollow. Rooster said they had shouted at him and told him that he was scaring the fuck out of them, and he was a dick for what he was doing. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. So they keep walking, and they start smelling the nasty, coppery ozone smell, and they say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and it's a dude standing in the forest, backwards slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking, and Tanner keeps going. I should have taken the rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, that a kind of low gibbering had started coming out from both sides of the woods, and they started booking it back to the trailer. The girl just said she had flashed her flashlight out to the woods to the side of them and had seen something jerking itself through the woods, and the gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light out from the campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them onto the track, and they had just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out in the woods, and at this point, assuming it's some rednecks or some shit trying to fuck with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin Junior starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goat man or some shit like that. We promptly tell him to shut up, because we really don't need to hear that spooky shit right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the goat man, and how we're in his woods, and blah blah blah. Now, at the time, I had never heard of the goat man, or anything like that. But then a couple of years ago, the year before I graduated college, I had a native for a roommate, and I ended up asking him about it. And to sum it up, it's basically a man with the head of a goat, and he could shapeshift, and he gets among groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be a kind of like a Wendigo, and it's bad mojo to even talk about, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I don't know this back when I was 16, so my cousin is going, "The goat man's going to get in and get us." The girls are all terrified, and my cousin and I are all trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or an animal. So, all of a sudden, the smell just goes away. Like, to this day, I haven't even experienced anything like that. Like, usually, smells fade away or get less, but it just literally was there 1 second, and then not the other second. So after an hour of making it around 9 or 10, we stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figure it was just some assholes trying to mess around, so we don't go back home, because we think if we do, they'll chase us down through the woods or other some crazy shit like that. Nothing else weird happens that night, and we stay another night, and for the main part of the night nothing happens. At about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories, as someone is finishing some spooky story. I don't remember what about, but the smell comes back, and it's so strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up and you can actually feel how clammy the air is, and I say we should go inside. This isn't right. We should have just left. We all go back inside. We're standing around, and my cousin just keeps going on about how it's the goat man again, and my cousin Rooster is trying to shut him up. All the while, I'm just feeling like something is wrong, and I can't figure out what it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong, and we're terrified, and we're all huddled in this camper. We end up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats in the pack, and we have a total of 3 of them. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody a hot dog. I get mine. After a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how the hell do I get 2, and everybody else only got 1. And I look at him like he's stupid. I tell him that everybody only got one because there were only 12 brats. If he wants more, he should open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tanner just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus Lord, oh Lord, get out!" She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on me and my cousin standing up that what the hell is wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and then I feel my heart sink. I run the hell out of the cabin, and the girl runs out with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everybody books out of the cabin. One of my cousin's friends asks us what's wrong, and I start counting us. There's only 11 of us now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin, but being that everybody didn't really know each other well, nobody had really noticed the whole time that there was an extra person. And then, I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know how when you are just dicking around, having a good time, you don't sweat the small stuff, and you don't always keep track of certain things. But I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us, and that they had been there for at least a day or two, eating with us. And what makes it worse is I could figure out which one because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person / the goat man. The girl kept praying to Jesus, and we're all sitting outside. Eventually, we get big sticks and go back in the cabin, and there's nobody in there. We count again, and there's still 11 people. We go back into the trailer and lock the door. We explain what happened, and the girl says that she realized too. And that's when he was about to say something that the person sitting next to her grabbed her leg hard and leaned over toward her and had said something she couldn't understand. So, we are pretty much scared as hell, and we huddle together, and then I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up, and half the people are asleep, and then half are packing up our shit. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay out until the sun is all the way up. And some people think that we're just messing around and still want to stay at the trailers. I just want to get the hell out of the woods. The girl's name was Kira, the one that the goat man had touched. Anyway, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she says that she just wants to go home, and she doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split people up, and the 4 that want to go can go, and then I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin, and it's my uncle's, and I have to lock up. I am super pissed at this point, because I feel like people aren't taking this shit seriously, and I definitely don't want to be out in the woods for another night. So I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people. Now 4 girls and 4 guys to bet the hell out of Dodge. Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle and says he's going to be back. So now there's just 7 of us left. This is about 4 o'clock. At around 5 o'clock, he hasn't made it back yet, and we're getting extremely antsy. And the only reason one stopped begging them to go back was because he went to go get a gun. Now it's about 5:30 or so, when one of the cousins that did stay says that the girl Kira is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, she was so scared, why the hell would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time the coppery smell is gone, but now I realize I can smell just a twinge of it. I say this to the rest of them and everybody. These are the people that wanted to stay in the woods after we had got the goat man in our midst, and are laughing at me and asking did I set this up to scare them. I'm looking at them like I'm not bullshitting you all right now. I asked them why would I play a trick like this. So one of the girls goes outside to get Kira. She gets about halfway to her and stops cold. Kira starts heaving. I don't know how the hell to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. And it was the fact that I thought this that made me realize there was not a sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was like later on in September, so it was still fairly hot at the time. But it was super chilly on some days too, and you could usually hear big geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chittering. So I step out to open the door and tell her to come back in the trailer right now. She backs up into the trailer, and we lock the fucking door and pull down all the shades, except one, and put someone there in a chair to watch her. She stands there for another 20 or so minutes. The guy turns to say that she's still there, and there's a huge bang on the door. We all jump up and scramble around the living room of the trailer. The bamming is super loud. So now my cousin is holding one of the girls, and the other two are kind of giggling with nervous laughter, and me, the other two guys, are just shitting bricks. Then we hear Tanner. He's screaming, "Let me in, stop playing!" So we go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in with his rifle. There's nobody else outside. Evidently, he had walked up into the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he had seen a girl. Mind you, he said it was not Kira, standing there when he had gotten to the edge of the clearing. She had turned toward him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing toward the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer he had realized that she was getting closer to him. She had started off by the fire and, without him even seeing her move, she had been turning and basically inching closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way to the cabin, thinking it would be open, and when he got to the door and it was locked, he turned and it was about half the distance to the door. He looks around the room and then he gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there are only 6 of you in here, right?" I get that feeling where your stomach drops in your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where, and then we all went outside to talk earlier in the day. It has just slipped right back in. We look out the window, and there is nobody out there. So we recount everyone, and then, basically, I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier, and everybody says 8. I say, "Well, how many are here now?" They all do the count and then realize there are only 7 people in the cabin. So Tanner had brought back a couple of boxes of ammo and his rifle, and he had told his dad that there was some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think his dad would believe him if he said it was a goat man. He says that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours, and that in the morning we can all go back to his place, and his cousin will drive us all home. Now, I'm really freaking terrified, but I at least feel better because we can be American and shoot the hell out of whatever it is if it comes back. But then, my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks that I'm trying to be funny and prank them, and that she's really getting scared, and that I'm not funny. He keeps telling her I'm not the kind of person, and she says, "Well, how do we know the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or is it really the goat man? How do we know that this is the real Tanner, and that the goat man just didn't kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun?" So we get into this huge argument about it, where me and Tanner are like we could seriously be in danger, because at the very least, someone has to be sneaking themselves into our trailer without us knowing and mingling with us, and at worst, it's something bad in the forest messing with us. One of the girls is crying and saying that she wants to go right now, and we're trying to tell her that's a no-go because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down, and it's getting a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we can't really get a station out there without anything decent, so we turn it off at about the time that Tanner's cousin shows up. At this point, the sun is just barely over the horizon, and he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer, and we whisper to Tanner, asking if he's sure that's his cousin, and he says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp, then walks in. He kind of glances at all of us and looks a little confused. He says, "Where's your other little buddy at?" I figured she would meet me up at the cabin. Is she a little be slow or something? And had he been cooking blood in the cabin because it smelt like bloody and hot pans all the way up the trail? We all fucking nope. Betamax and ask him what the fuck he's talking about. He had come down the same trail as Tanner had been using, and he had come up upon one of his buddies standing in the middle of the trail looking at him slack-jawed. He had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. Then she smiled at him, and he said he kept walking, but she couldn't seem to keep up with him, and kept lagging a little bit behind him. He said he asked her if she was hurt or something, and did she need help, and she had continued to stare. He said eventually he had been walking and had turned around, a bend in the trail when he turned and went back to see if she was okay, but the trail was empty. He had assumed she had taken some sort of shortcut through the woods to their trailer. Well, tell him the whole story of what's been going on, and he nopes the hell out. Like I expected him to stay, or say we're full of shit. He was like 19, I think, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. He says that when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it kind of weirded him out, so he tried to keep up in front of her, but no matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little bit behind, and that he smelled this nasty smell, and it got stronger as he got closer to the camp. He said eventually it got really strong, and she had said something really low that he didn't quite catch, and he had turned and she had been right the hell up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point he asked her if she was okay, and if she wasn't him to carry her back to the rest of the way, and she just kept staring. He said he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder. He must have misjudged the distance, because she was off to the side of where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point, we know the shit's real, unless Tanner is playing a joke, which we can tell he's not because he's almost pissing his pants. So load the rifles up and we eat some more, and we kind of just sit around until about 11. To this day, every time I think about this, I pray to God that it's some huge prank that my cousins played on me, and just never really revealed, so I would just think about it the rest of my life. At around 11, the stink of copper turns into an actual, nasty, gross blood smell, like cooking blood and singed hair. Tanner and his cousin Risa get the fuck up and instantly grab the rifles. There's like half knocking, half clawing at the door, and I crap you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like when you see the YouTube cats and dogs whose owners teach them how to talk, and it says in this halting, weirdly toned voice, "Let me in, stop playing around." It made my nuts creep up against my body. One of the girls just starts crying and calling on Jesus. It was so obvious it was not a person talking. It didn't even have the right cadence, and that's some stuff that I've never realized until that moment. But all people have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people have a certain kind of rhythm to talking. The shit didn't have any kind of cadence or rhythm. YouTube those cats, and that's what it sounded like outside the door. So no, I'm in full-on terror mode, and we keep yelling outside, "Who is it? Stop messing around." And it just keeps saying, "In," or "let me in," for almost 15 minutes. So then the smell goes away for a while, and for the next hour or so you can hear someone basically creeping around the woods, and every couple minutes it comes back into the door and says something. Finally, when the smell fades away, it's around 2 a.m. right now, and Reese says, "Man, screw this," and opens the door and walks outside with his rifle. He fires a shot into the air and says something in the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away." He fires 2 more times, and then from the woods, right up against the river across from the trailer, it sounds like something is slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming, and it sounds like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Like I seriously have never heard any of this like that, and you can hear the brush over that way start to shake. Reese fires over into the tree line and then starts backing into the house. We locked the door and we could hear this stuff keening and screaming. Reese says something had come out of the bushes, super low to the ground, crawling toward the cabin. He had shot at it. Pretty much that was how the rest of the night went. It literally was screaming constantly for the next 2 hours, and we could hear stuff moving out into the tree line. But it never came back up to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tanner had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle. Nobody else heard or saw this, and he told me 2 days later, after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises finally ceased, and he had been almost asleep when he saw someone out of the bathroom and then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us, and he had nodded off. Then he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be sleeping, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He basically didn't want to try and shoot at the thing in the cabin and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill ourselves. So he just stayed awake all night, pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing, or heave it like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. So the story closes pretty weak because, from my perspective, nothing really happened. We woke up and I noticed that Tanner was a little jittery and that he was avoiding looking at all of us. But we ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring my uncle's keys, to just start walking and he'd catch up, which I didn't really want to do. We got a little bit up the path and he came running up, and basically, we just jogged back to his house and his cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tanner had gone back to lock up and look in there, and he said there was a window, that we were stupid to lock and that there was no screen on it. The window was effing up when he went in there. I'm guessing it had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up, and then getting in among us. It walked with us all the damn way back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group, and then looked him dead in the eyes and walked into the woods. Wendigos, skinwalkers, horrible creatures that lurk in the night. These beings aren't like other cryptids covered. These creatures come for you. They try to lure you in. Will you be pulled in and be a victim to one of these evil beings? Or will you be able to break free of their spell? Tonight, we're going to look at several skinwalker and wendigo encounters. Enjoy. To start this off, there are zero bear, moose, or elk where I lived at the time. Background info. At the time, I was around 12 or 14, and I was with my friend who I'll call Kayla. We planned on going to a picnic in her pastures. As we walked up a smaller hill, Kayla pushed me to the ground and whispered to me, "Do you see that?" At least 20 or so feet away was a tall creature. It stood on 4 thin limbs and its head was narrow, similar to that of a horse or a deer. It was completely black. I couldn't make out features, but it had a mane just like a lion, but it seemed flat and coarse. The mane, like fur, ran along its back, stopping near the rear. It had no tail. Here's a side note. All of the cattle were moved to a completely different area. Nowhere near this one. No other livestock animals were in those pastures. But this thing was just staring off. Suddenly, my friend stood up and made a beeline for the exit that was at least 2 miles away. I didn't hesitate to follow her. We finally stopped near the latched fence that led to her house and looked back. We had a pretty good view of the hill it stood on. It was slowly walking back into the trees. This still gives me chills to this day. Okay, so Friday, 1:28 a.m. Me and my friends decided to go for a drive. We sometimes like to go to the Llano Mountains to experience something that only happens in that area, paranormal and supernatural. Like any other time we do this, we go in my car and drive past Tome Hill, going towards the mountains and park across from VHS about 1.5 miles away. Then we sit and take in the scenic beauty of the dark desert, starting by listen closely to anything and looking everywhere, being hyper observant. At first, we saw a light in the distance traveling flat on the desert land, getting within about 1 mile away from us, then disappearing altogether. Moving on from where I had to see something else. Driving through roads and flying by at least 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, we turned down a familiar road. This is where we knew that something was about to change me and everyone else. We all looked to the right side of the car, and we all saw what we believed to be something like a skinwalker. A massive black dog just hunched over at my car while I was going 45 miles an hour through the road. We should have felt impact from the massive creature, but we didn't. Both people in the back seat looked and saw this thing rise up from the ground and stand straight up on 2 legs, absolutely huge and all black with red eyes that are forever imprinted in my mind. I didn't slow down, but sped up, going about 55 miles an hour now, so probably about 20 yards away they saw it rise up, as if nothing happened to it. Before I begin, I'm a 16-year-old male. About 3 years ago, I was in Virginia visiting my family over the summer. We were right outside the DC area and staying in a 2-story house near the freeway. On the other side of the freeway was a forest. So, my mom, her boyfriend Eric, and I were all staying with Eric's parents. We had brought some night vision binoculars and decided that tonight was the perfect time to use them. So, after dinner, we geared up and we headed out. We pass under the freeway and head into the woods. When we get about 5 minutes into the forest, we set down our bag and we take out our binoculars. My mom looks around with them for quite a while, seeing a few squirrels here and there. She gets tired of them and eventually passes them on to me. I look around for a while, being careful not to look at the freeway for fear of being blinded. I spot something behind a tree about 50 feet to our left. I concentrate on it, trying to figure out what it is. It looks like a pale, bald, anorexic man looking straight at us from behind a tree. I get a bit uneasy, but I'm hesitant to believe it's really there. I ask Eric to take a look, just in case. To my despair, he sees it too. He describes it much the same way I did. Now, Eric is a former amateur boxer, and I train MMA almost every day, but neither one of us wants to stick around with that thing. We start heading back to the house, crossing under the freeway. We take another look behind us as a car comes by. All 3 of us see glowing eyes lit up by the headlights on the other side of the freeway. We say fuck that and we head back to the house. When we get back, Eric's parents are asleep, and my mom and Eric go upstairs to the guest room. There's only one guest room, so I have the couch downstairs. I'm a little too excited after seeing the thing in the woods, so I end up staying up all night. Around 3 a.m., I'm watching TV and I start hearing footsteps above me. I immediately remember our earlier encounter, and I panic a little. I try to calm down and tell myself it's just one of the dogs, or maybe someone who couldn't sleep. I keep hearing the footsteps though, for a while actually, until I hear a doorknob jiggle. I find it weird that they're trying to open a locked door, but I try to ignore it. They stop, walk around for a few more minutes, and then it's quiet again. I stay up until the sun starts coming up, and then I pass out. My mom wakes me up, and I remember the footsteps from the night before. I describe what happened and ask if one of them got up at any time. She says no, and I think it must have been one of the dogs. That is, until she tells me the room above me is the office. No one was in the office, and the door stays locked at night. My heart sinks as I piece it all together. I don't know if it was that thing for sure, but I think it was. I've done a lot of research since then, trying to figure out what that was that night. I found two creatures that seemed to match it. I think it was either a Skinwalker or possibly a Wendigo. Whichever one it was, I'm just thankful that door was locked. I know I wouldn't be able to fight that thing, no matter how tough I am. To start this story off, and to give a little insight about me, I'm an 18-year-old female who grew up in Michigan and have lived in the country for as long as I can remember. And for heads up in this is a long story, so please bear with me. Now, back to the story. On one particular hot summer weekend, me and a couple of friends, including my boyfriend, let's call him Tony, and my older brother, let's call him Brad, decided we were going to do some camping for the weekend, since it was such a nice warm week. Tony's parents had owned a cabin way out in Ludington, surrounded by a huge wooded area with a personal lake and no neighbors for at least 4 miles. But, being stupid teenagers, we didn't really think about that. All we were ready for was to party like any normal teenagers would. Well, after being there for 2 hours, our fun had started. Tony's friends had brought a ton of alcohol and weed to last us for the weekend, so we wouldn't be bored since we had no service and only movies to watch. After it got around 12 a.m. and was pitch black, we had a huge bonfire going. It was a total of 6 people, including me and Tony. As we talked and laughed about coming up events in our lives, we were so distracted that we didn't even notice that my brother had literally frozen his eyes to one section of the woods. Mind you, we were all intoxicated and high at the time. Eventually, our talking ceased when Tony realized his friend and my brother had an emotionless expression. "Hey dude, you alright?" he asked Brad. Silence. Brad didn't reply or even make any movements that would indicate he heard him. After that, I started to get scared, as well as the other 2 girls there. It took a lot for my brother to act that way. Eventually, I was the first to catch on what he was excessively staring into a certain spot in the woods. I turned my head and followed his gaze the best I could. And when I finally caught on to what he was staring at, my heart dropped. There, right fucking there, was at first look a dog. At least, that's what I thought. It was some person's dog that had wandered off. But then my brain kicked in and I realized there wasn't neighbors for miles. So how could there be a dog? My mind started to race while Tony still tried to get Brad to speak even more. In one motion, this thing stood up tall. And when I say tall, I mean gigantic. It had to be at least 6 feet tall. Everyone has seen it then. How could you not? The other two girls and the other boy with us gasped as they finally grasped why my brother was still as hell. No one moved for what seemed like hours. Tony was the first to talk. "No tail," he mumbled. No one heard what he said but Brad. And I swear to you, when I say his eyes widened as big as pan saucers, that freaked me out immediately. "What did you say?" one of the girls had asked. "It has no fucking tail," he hissed at her. My heartbeat stopped. He was right. There was no tail on this thing. Suddenly, my clouded alcohol mind cleared up in a fraction of a second when I finally realized that what this thing was exactly. Now, I understand why my brother was basically shitting his pants. This thing was a skinwalker. My instincts kicked in right then and there. But before I could nope the fuck out of there, this thing let off a terrible stench, like rotting meat, before screaming inhuman-like. The sound was enough to scare the hell out of everyone. My brother was the first up out of his chair and started shouting native words out to the creature, and why I told everyone to get the hell inside. No one questioned me when they seen just how dead serious I was, especially Tony. He's never seen me so scared, so he knew it was a bad situation. We all hightailed it into the cabin with my brother in tow, still shouting native words at the creature, which seemed to keep it at bay, while I gave us enough time to get inside. He slammed and locked the door before turning all the lights off and grabbing a special ash from the kitchen counters and started throwing it at every window and door, all while chanting. Of course, he had everyone freaked out and basically in tears at that moment. After he was done, no one said a word for a long time. All of us were still in shock. He grabbed our dad's pistol and had it posted by him for hours. Everyone was entirely too shaken up to even question what happened. We must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to my brother packing all of our stuff into 2 cars early in the morning. I understood why. We had native family. We knew what we were dealing with, and we knew it would come back, and maybe, just maybe, not alone. Before we left, I did a blessing on the cabin and spoke a few calming words to the still very freaked out young girls. We left as soon as everything was packed up. To this day, we still haven't explained exactly to our friends what happened that night, and they never bothered to ask us either. I'm having a hard time remembering the stories told to me by my Navajo family, but when I Skype with them again, I will ask for me. This creepy set of events happened directly to me though, so here goes. My first personal encounter. I know it's lengthy, but hey, skinwalkers, they do require a backstory. It started when my 2 brothers, who we'll call David and Luke's girlfriend, who we will call Sarah, all drove down to the desert to spend some time out in the country. This is reservation land, as it were, so red dirt was everywhere. This was in southern Utah, a majestically beautiful place if you ever get the chance to visit. We had some pistols and decided to go out and target practice. We took our gear and some old targets to a place called Devil's Heartbeat. I had never been, but all 3 of them were familiar with the area. It was a canyon about 200 or so feet deep. We stayed on one end of the canyon, by the drop-offs, and to our left was the ravine. About 50 feet over, the opposite side of the canyon rose up above us, where some other ruins were. The Navajo may disagree with historians on the Anasazi's origin and departure. According to Navajo legend, they simply disappeared from existence, leaving behind plates, dishes, food, and went into another dimension, or some equivalent. But, whatever the history, the Navajo do not like to wander in the ruins. I never asked why, but figured it had something to do with disrespect, preserving history, etc. As such, none of the others cared a bit about these canyon ruins. They were more interested in shooting pistols. I could see old beds, ladders, and even cave drawings on the cliffs with just my naked eye. And I got this strange fixation on going over there. I'm not Navajo and felt that their rules didn't apply to me. I set down the cliffs without a rope and decided I would climb down, cross the canyon floor, and then climb back up. This was a bad idea for a million reasons, but it was just like some obsession. I can't explain the feeling. It was the magneticism. I wanted to be in those ruins, and it wasn't just a touristy-like curiosity. It felt like I was meant to go there. I kept slipping and kept getting stuck on the rocks. I was so frustrated I almost started crying. Finally, I was deterred by the unmistakable sound of a growl coming from the canyon floor below me. There were trees down there, so I couldn't see what was making the growl, but a mountain lion immediately rose to my mind, and I got my ass back up to the cliffside. I said nothing to the others, and we shot guns for a while. The only other strange occurrence was while Sarah was aiming, things got eerily quiet. We all heard a sound from behind us, maybe 20 feet away. It was almost a growl, but then a hoarse laugh, almost like a lion, and then a hyena. We had a clear view of the entire area, and there was nothing. Certainly not on the cliff tops where we had heard it anyway. The creepy part was that while David, Sarah, and I all heard it from a close distance, Luke heard the exact same noise, right by his ear. We ended up camping out there to see if anything would happen, and this is when I got completely terrified. Before, I was only scared of wild animals. We had guns though, and were sleeping with no bags or tents, just some blankets under the stars, and a little flare, so I felt safe when we all laid down. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but woke up a few hours later to see everyone else lying with their eyes wide open, listening. The canyon was completely full of noise. The only way to describe it is people banging rocks together. There would be one set, maybe 300 yards away, then another clacking 200 yards away, and then 50 yards away. The canyon echoes, so it was hard to tell exactly how many rock smacking rock noises there were going on, but they sounded like Morse code. We listened to this for maybe 10 minutes. No other animal noises. Nothing. Finally, David, who is kind of a hard ass and the least superstitious, shouted, "Shut up!" And everything immediately stopped. My heart was in my throat. We just sat there and stared at one another, wide-eyed. It was dead quiet. And then we heard another super weird noise from the ruins. I don't know how to explain this one either, but it kind of sounded like a zebra noise, like these squeaky trills. It got louder, and then the rocks, sticks, whatever they were, started up again. But this was worse, because now other animal noises came. We heard what sounded like wolves or coyotes barking, monkeys screeching. In my opinion, those were the most terrifying. Owls hooting, and through it all, the terrible zebra noises. We said nope, and got our happy little asses out of there immediately. It took us maybe 10 minutes to douse that fire, pack our blankets, and speed away. And the noises were continuing the entire time. That night, I was obviously pretty shaken up. Before I could fall asleep again, my Navajo mother came and sat by me and said that she could tell I had a rough day. We hadn't mentioned the creepy shit to avoid a lecture about fucking with spirits. She asked me about it, and I ended up spilling my guts about not seeing the canyon ruins. It was something personal. It felt like it. I wanted to go there, so why couldn't I? It would have been beautiful. After I told her all about it, I could see that she had a really concerned look on her face. "What is it?" I asked, totally confused, and she explained something I had no idea about. The spirits in the ruins like to lure people up. When they get up on the ground, the spirits push them off. That's why we don't go there. I remained creeped out for the remainder of the visit. The town has a public access kiva, kind of a tourist trap for a little podunk place, but since I didn't see the ruins up close, I went down into the kiva, and I went alone, as of course my superstitious family refused to enter other natives' dwellings. I figured that nothing could push me off a cliff, if I was in a kiva. I was right, but something even worse happened. Fast forward to a few weeks later, I worked a shitty call center in Salt Lake City, 3rd shift. It was my first night alone, and I was feeling jumpy ever since the kiva. My brothers already warned me that I had a skinwalker following me, but of course didn't believe it. I don't smoke, but I followed my coworkers out for smoke breaks because I'm talkative and I like to chat. Tonight, I lurked in the doorway because I had this horrible cloud of dread hanging over me. I was peeping out the glass door and being a total weirdo. It hit me then how paranoid I had been. That's what skinwalkers do. They mess with your mind. While I was pacing on the front of the glass doors, I decided that this whole thing was stupid, and I was going to go outside and stand there for the rest of my 10-minute break. Most of the smokers were already filling back in, but I walked out and put my hands in my pockets, looked at the sky, looked at the building, mentally patting myself on the back for not being a pussy. Then I saw something that I will never be able to give a rational or even halfway accountable explanation for. We have like 6 parking lots. In one of the lots far away from me, maybe 100 feet, I could see something walking. It was a dog, obviously, but it was almost limping and walked like it was tired or hurt. Animal lover me forgot all about skinwalkers, and I started walking toward it, making the "come here, doggy" noises. And then I stopped abruptly. The dog had the body form of a greyhound, and it was gray, but there was something very, very wrong with it. It had bloody legs and limped, but it walked more like a person would on feet and hands. Its butt was moving to and from, if that makes any sense. When it heard me, it just stopped without turning, something I've never known any dog to do. And finally, it looked over its shoulder at me, and this is the freaky part. This dog was looking at me the way a person does. It had huge eyes, way too big for a greyhound, and its teeth were bared like it was considering biting me. Then it growled, but it was like a whistle growl, noises no regular animals make. It almost sounded like it wanted to talk to me, or was taunting me. Somehow, in the middle of all of this, I realized that it didn't have a tail, and I'd heard from all the Navajo stories that skinwalkers, when they appear as animals, don't have tails. Forgetting all logic and rationale, I turned and jetted. I didn't look back until I was back inside the building and had pulled the door shut behind me. And by then, when I looked, of course the thing was gone. When I described this to my brothers, they were absolutely sure it was a skinwalker. and they went through the trouble of blessing me, my apartment, them and their apartments. I never saw the creepy, bloody dog again, and I have never even slightly wanted to visit the cliff ruins.